I am Midshipman Pierce Murray, and this is my Operations Research Extra Credit project. Now for this project, I decided to do something that was fairly simple, something that I could grasp, be able to talk about, and something I was wondering what it would look like when I simulated. So in this case, I decided to do semi-trucks going through a facility. They're receiving different services, whether required by law or to help them get their items onto their truck. And then after going through the facility and receiving these services, leaving the facility and going to their respective destination. In the case of this simulation, their destination would either be your normal retail store like Walmart or Costco, or a hazardous materials facility with specialized areas for holding hazardous materials. So for this simulation, I have my delivery trucks, or semi-trucks, arriving at the packaging facility to unload their packages. This is done from 4 entrance gates, these 4 entrance gates right here. From the entrance gates, they must wait in a queue at the 4 individual truck docking doors, these 4 docking doors right here, and each queue is set to a capacity of 4 trucks. This is because of space limitations. You can't obviously have an infinite number of semi-trucks taking up space in a lot when there's not an infinite amount of space in said lot. Now the top 2 queues are for the commonplace objects service. These are things like toilet paper, snacks, or maybe even fruits and veggies, things that would go in your average retail store. The bottom 2 queues are for your hazardous materials. These are things like fuels, radioactive materials, things that can't easily be processed or packaged and have to be in specialized containers marked hazardous. Those are your 2 services mentioned here. 1 service, 2 service. After those services, they then wait in a subsequent queue for the facility to unload their truck. These are the queues for unloading the truck, and these are the services for unloading their trucks. So at each of these queues, they would wait in the queue, and then when ready, the workers will load their truck with all their supplies. From each of the cargo unload services, they can then go to any one of the 5 queues for the 5 weighing stations. Now these weighing stations are required by law. This is to prevent damage to the roads or damage to the truck. And whenever you're driving through state lines, you're on the highway, you'll notice that these weighing stations exist in a lot of states. And generally, if they actually have hazardous materials, they have to declare them at those weighing stations. Now, from each of these weighing stations, they'll then be able to have all their services finished and leave the facility through the exit gate to go to their respective destination. Now, for this simulation, I'll be running it for 1 month, and my clock properties is set to the unit of hours. For each of these arrival areas, I have them set to an inter-arrival rate of 1/6, meaning every hour, 6 trucks will arrive in each one of these gates. For the commonplace objects, I have the inter-service rate set to 1/17, and for the hazardous materials, I have 1/14. Now these are pretty efficient service rates. They're working very quickly in both of these, but the reason why one has 17 versus 14 is because hazardous materials are harder to handle. They take more time to get moved around, so obviously you're going to have less services per hour conducted with these hazardous materials. For the cargo unload, each of them is set to 1/8, meaning 8 each hour, and for the weighing stations, it's 1/10. Now, if I run this simulation for 1 month, here are the results I'll receive. So, first thing you'll notice is here at the arrival. If I look here and I click on it, I've set my routing out before initially starting the simulation. I've set it to have about 70% going to the common objects queues and 30% going to the hazardous materials queues. This is me basically saying I think 70% of the trucks that come to this facility are going to want common objects. 30% are going to want hazardous materials. So I split the probability evenly among the 2 queues, but had the probabilities higher for the common objects than the hazardous materials. Again, because hazardous materials are less frequently needed or requested, and so you'll find more trucks wishing for commonplace objects in this simulation. Another thing you'll notice with these trucks is if I hover over them, you're given an items lost count: 32, 30, 36, and 30. This items lost count is basically if the trucks arrive and they see that all 4 of these queues are full, well, why would they want to enter the system if there's no open queues for them to go into? Since these queues have capacity limitations, you're going to have some trucks that are going to arrive and see that all the queues are full, and they're going to cut their losses, go to another facility, and so their count is lost items. Now, since the simulation was run for 1 month and the items lost for each of these is around 30, that's actually fairly good. It means each day you only lose about 1 truck, which is pretty good for a facility of this magnitude. If you go to each of these queues and you hover over them, or better yet, look at the results, you'll notice that on average 0.19 trucks enter there. And you have 1270 entering there. And your average wait time is 0.05 hours. Now this queue has 2 left over in it, and if I hover over it, the wait time is a little larger. This is most likely because this queue may have gotten bogged up at one point or another, and so the wait time increased, and it even was left with 2 left over in it. Now if I look at my common objects results, or better yet, I look at the routing out, you'll notice that I set it to shortest queue. This means that the trucker is here and he's just finished getting his objects and he's looking at the queues. Well, he sees this queue has 1 truck in it, this has 2, this has 3, and this has 4. And to preface, these queues are the only queues with capacity limitations. All these others are infinite capacity. He sees there's 1 truck here, 2 here, 3 here, and 4 here, and he says, well, I want to get paid faster, I want to get my job done faster, and I want to get out of here faster. So I'm going to go to the queue that is shortest with the 1 trucker. That should get me out of here faster. Same applies here for hazardous materials. Now, if I look at my data for commonplace objects, the results here, I notice immediately, and this is quite troubling, that 95% of the time, these commonplace object workers are working. Now that obviously isn't great for worker morale, but in the case of this simulation, they have to be working 95% of the time to keep up with the vast amount of trucks that are entering their service area. There's also an average of 0.91 trucks entering. As for the hazardous materials, the results come out a little bit different. It's more of a 50-50 split, which is better for these workers, but the obvious reason again is because you have less hazardous materials trucks coming in, less are needed, and so they're working a little bit less than the commonplace objects workers. As for the cargo unload services, they're working 70% of the time, which still isn't very great, but it's a lot better than these commonplace objects workers. As for the weighing stations, they're working around a 50-50 split as well. Now there's a variety of reasons why these working percentages may be different. For one, there are only 2 services here that they can go to, whereas there's 4 separate services here, 5 separate services here. It makes for a better working environment for these guys. However, as I mentioned before, the hazardous materials, there's less coming through, and so there's less work being done overall. Now I'm going to run the simulation instead of 1 month for 3 months to hopefully reach a steady state. Now immediately I noticed that this queue is full. Originally the 1 month had 2, and this now has 4. There's also a lot more that have entered the system, and a lot more that have left the system. The wait times are generally the same here. And if I look at my results for these commonplace objects and hazardous materials services, the working percentages are around the same and the averages are around the same, meaning I believe I've reached a steady state. Now, the important thing with a situation like this is to notice what is wrong and find ways to solve it. This is always the case with any business. You always want to better your service or better the times that people go through and overall make it a better experience for everyone and for you as the boss. Immediately what I would see is this queue is getting bogged up, which likely means we have a lot of trucks coming through here in these commonplace objects. There are a few actions you could take. You can increase the capacity of these queues. Now, like I mentioned earlier, there are space concerns with that, which means you would have to also increase your space in the lot. But if you increase the capacity here, you're going to alleviate some of those wait times, and you're going to allow more trucks in and not have as many trucks left over in the queues. You could also hire more workers here to make them get this done faster so these queues are emptying out quicker. Hazardous materials seems fine for the simulation, but you could always alleviate their stress just a little bit as well. You could also maybe add more services, more service areas for these hazardous materials or commonplace objects. Again, there are always cost concerns with such an action, but if you want to better the work environment or better your facility in general, then you could do something like that. In addition, you could also maybe take an action kind of like how these weighing stations and cargo unloads are, where you have individual queues going to individual services. So if you had another service here, you could have this queue go there instead. In general, however, this simulation, it's over an everyday thing that you would see at, say, maybe an Amazon facility or maybe at a place where semi-trucks are loaded. You'll find that these vehicles are coming in, they're receiving their services necessary, and they're going out with their cargo. And this is done every day in a lot of places. So with these simulations, it's always important to know how the simulation reacts to certain service rates and arrival rates, as well as your queuing and how many queues you may have. But overall, this was a very valuable experience. I learned a lot from it, and I'm glad to have done it.